Meta, subversive storytelling, games about games, abstract narratives, breaking the fourth wall, Waluigi Wiggler. It's difficult to fully pin down what exactly meta means when discussing games and other pieces of media. The word meta means referring to itself, but this definition changes depending on what genre of game you're talking about. For multiplayer games, meta refers to the most optimal strategy to win, the best gun, the best character, the best technique, whatever the game's about. So AK-74U with Rapid Fire or Meta Knight. Get it? Get it? Meta Knight? Because he's top tier and it's the name of the video and it's the name. Get it? Meta Knight? For single player, meta is used basically the same way as its definition. It refers to the idea of the game referencing itself as a video game. Like how This Is the Only Level makes jokes about the game being only one level. Or how No More Heroes opens up with the protagonist talking about how M-rated the game is. Or a Conker saying, press A to jump extra high. Or this funky little jokester telling you that you should be burning in hell. Things like that. I think oftentimes gamers sum up meta storytelling as just referencing the fact it's a video game within the game's narrative. Yeah, that is correct, but I think it is a huge oversimplification of what meta storytelling can be. Metafiction goes so much deeper than just being self-referential. There's deep commentary and metaphor about gamers and their relationship with games, complex mechanics that blend fiction and reality together, symbolism between the player character and the player themselves, the player as a character in the game's world, separate from the protagonist, and just new ways of engaging with media in general. I think people with a deep understanding of subtext and media literacy do often catch the overlying themes and feelings metafiction is going for, but I rarely, if ever, actually see anyone talking about it. I almost never see any actual discussion on just how metafiction is used and the differences between how games use it. And the reason I say people catch these nuances and not gamers is because gamers aren't people. Subscribe. Playing War is bad. Just Monika, Would You Kindly, The Lord of Cinder, basically all of every Metal Gear Solid game. Yes, there are like 50 gorillion video essays on each of these games and all these specific moments, but can we really label all of these games and this game and this game and this game in the same category? They're all using metafiction techniques, yes, but they're all using them in vastly different ways. And that's sick, dude. Let's talk about it. So put away your dual needlers, noob tubes, your Gwinsu's Rageblade, park your Wagners, your Sentinels, Funky Kong, because we're not talking about multiplayer meta today. We're talking about meta is defined as showing or suggesting an explicit awareness of itself or oneself as a member of its category, which is a fancy way of saying it knows what it is. If you look up metafiction or meta-narrative, you'll get definitions that are pretty dang similar to that idea. It's a story that knows it's a story. A game that knows it's a game. Art that knows it's art. Anything that breaks or knocks on the fourth wall would be considered something meta. Metafiction techniques can fall into 4 different categories: meta-mechanics, meta-metaphor, meta-narrative, and meta-matorial. I really wanted to make the alliteration work here, okay? Let's break it down from least wacky to most wacky. Meta-tutorial, or more eloquently, meta-tutorialization, is simply how the player is taught how to play the game. Not all tutorials directly talk to the player, but many of them do, like pop-up windows that pause the game or characters talking to the protagonist on how to play. But the best ones talk to both the player and the character at the same time. Making these little teaching moments for the player diegetic creates a stronger bond with the fictional game world and the real-life player. Some simple examples would be how the menu in Nier Automata serves as both 2B's interface menu as well as the menu for the player to play the game. So at the beginning of the game where you're adjusting the game's audio, it adjusts 2B's hearing so she can hear things around her. Thank you, 9S. Very cool. At the beginning of Conker's Bad Fur Day, Beardy the Scarecrow teaches Conker that pressing the B button leads to context-sensitive actions. Meaning, each time you see this B symbol on the ground, the player presses B to alter the situation they're in. The game makes fun of pre-established 3D platforming conventions while still teaching the player how to play the game, for both the player character Conker and the player themselves.
Hey, where the f you been?
Okay, I know there's an opera singing poop monster and constant fart jokes, but I promise Conker's a very, very smart game. I promise.
Now this is what I call a platform game.
Meta mechanics are the player interacting with the game mechanics outside of the game world, which sounds really complex, and it definitely is when you try to work a meta mechanic into a story, but it's one of those things that isn't nearly as abstract as you think it is when you just take a step back. Yeah, you have to plug your controller into slot 2 to defeat Psycho Mantis, and yeah, the codex you need to get Meryl's numbers on the back of the box, and yeah, when you shake the controller, Rose's chest bounces up and down. We get it, Metal Gear does meta stuff all the time, and it's sometimes a little questionable. But even my grandma knows who Psycho Mantis is, come on. You know what's simpler to talk about? Wii Sports. Game has the virtual character hold and throw a bowling ball. You pretend to hold and throw a bowling ball. You're performing actions in real life that the game is telling you to do. Reality and fiction have merged. You are no longer in control. Wake up, Mr. Freeman. But of course, bouncing boobas with your DualShock 3 is only a mechanical feat. Did I seriously just say that? But of course, examples like these are only mechanical features. How do we apply these ideas to a cohesive storytelling experience? You wrap the narrative around it. You create challenges within the story that the player must interact with in the real world in order to solve. Like how you have to go through the game's files and change the time on your PC to solve puzzles in I'm Scared. Or how Doki Doki Literature Club will do the exact same thing, but also include Easter eggs, unique artwork, short stories, and other secrets hidden within the game's files. Or how Pony Island will actually, you know what, scratch that. A lot of indie horror games like to use meta mechanics to mess with the player and make them feel uncomfortable, which is awesome. It's really unique, but I feel like I can't actually talk about them because then I'll just spoil the games. And some of the best parts of these games are the mechanics and the commentary they have. So you get it. Meta mechanics can be used to get spooky. This is a really disjointed section in this video. Oh my god. Press A to jump extra high. Back to Metal Gear, specifically Snake Eater. You can fast forward the clock on your game console to kill one of the game's bosses because they die of old age. The over 100 years old legendary World War II sniper, if you make enough time pass, you can make him turn to dust. That's pretty good. That's clever. It's fun. It's unique, etc. But I can't help but feel, and maybe hear me out. What if you shake the controller and the characters in game? When you shake the controller, the characters in the game. Okay, hear me out. When you shake the controller in No More Heroes, the game's guiding character Sylvia calls you before every boss fight. So you would listen to her phone call while you walk down the hallway to the boss. But in the game's original release on the Wii, the call would come from the speaker in the Wii remote. But the call would be so quiet you would have to hold the Wii remote up to your ear in order to be able to hear it, like an actual cell phone. Travis would hold up his phone to his ear. The player would then hold their Wii remote up to their ear. So the player feels further in sync with the protagonist by performing the exact same actions as them. So this super hyper violent hardcore M-rated game pokes fun at the player by having them hold their controller like a phone, so to make them feel a bit more silly about themselves. But not only that, No More Heroes is a commentary on the medium of video games in general, and oftentimes it makes Travis out to be lame, cringy, and naive to his own failings as a human being, even though he thinks he's the coolest guy in town, which is a metaphor to the edgy, too cool for you culture that gaming was ubiquitous with during the late 90s and 2000s. Because No More Heroes is it's just so good, everyone needs to play it. Wait, I'm getting way ahead of myself. We're not going to talk about metaphors for like 9 more minutes. Long sidetrack aside, meta mechanics are just things you do in real life to affect the game. Whether that's swinging a controller or messing with the system clock or messing with game files, it's just cool things like that that you do in real life to affect the virtual life. There we go. Now we can move on to the next segment. Meta-narrative is the game directly referencing itself being a game, or when the player is a character in the game world separate from the protagonist. A narrative account that experiments with or explores the idea of storytelling, often by drawing attention to its own artificiality. So it's just a game that knows it's a game and uses its gameness to explore what games are.
Gaming.
I want to stress that I do mean very literally when the game is expressed and references itself as a game. Or in the very least, it acknowledges itself as a fictional experience. No, lifting the Wii remote and nunchuck-like weights is not an example of a meta-narrative technique. But having the final boss of the game make a joke about her backstory increasing the age rating, that would be a meta-narrative technique. Conker asking the game programmers to open up the game's code to give him a gun, Lucky Carter talking about playing the Inscription video game while you're playing the Inscription video game, whatever the ending to Metal Gear Solid 2 was, whatever the heck is going on in Alan Wake.
Always talk of meta-narratives. Can't expect them to disappear once the seed ends.
Meta-narrative involves literally using the medium of interactive media to tell a story in interactive media. All of these moments are only possible due to the medium they occur in. Both the characters and the designers know that.
Did you see the prologue?
So to strengthen the themes of the game, the creators have the in-game characters reference and comment on the very nature of the artificial world they reside in. This category is what I believe most people associate meta storytelling with, and it is the broadest technique out of the four we're talking about. At any point, if a game goes, ooh-wee, look at me, I'm a video game, press A to jump extra high, that would constitute it falling under a meta-narrative. But to implement the idea of self-reference and how you teach the player to play the game, or on real-life actions you must perform to affect the game, I think it's just a bit different than just regular old meta-narrative. You could ask, why say meta-narrative and not just meta? Because then the meta actions the player performs and the meta moments in the story all fall under the same category. And those things are different enough to warrant different subcategories in my famous YouTuber opinion. So yes, all four categories we're talking about today, you could call meta-narrative, but you couldn't necessarily call all meta techniques a tutorial or mechanic or metaphor, if that makes sense. Jacob knew the progress bar at the bottom of the screen would continue to march on, only stopping if the viewer demands it. The video clips, audio files, recorded lines, they now exist independent of the one who birthed them, out of the creator's hands. Was anyone watching? Maybe everyone is. Regardless, the inevitable is coming. The next video will be played soon. Jacob hoped he had enough time, and that this video would be okay once he was gone. A subcategory of meta-narrative I think a lot of people may not think about is the player as a character within the story. I'm not talking about Gordon Freeman and Doom Guy being blank slate characters for the player to self-insert to. That's under the metaphor category. And we still have like 5 or so minutes, so just hold your horses, okay? We'll get there. I mean, literally, the player is considered a character separate from the character they are playing as. Alright, I'm gonna be like, as spoiler-free for the next few games as possible, but like, the player being a character in the game is kind of the big twist for like all of the examples I'm gonna use. So even if I say the title of the game right now, you're gonna go, wow, I can't believe how you just spoiled how Super Monkey Ball 2 is a tour de force of surrealist late 90s aesthetics and holds meta commentary about all of us being primates navigating the slopes, turns, and pitfalls in the sphere of post-late stage capitalism. Thanks a lot, internet teen sensation Tito Gito Lounge. And in response, I'll say, you're welcome. But no, I just want to give you a heads up because I really don't want to spoil any of these games I'm about to mention, but just mentioning them in the category spoils them at least a little bit, so like, just tread carefully, I guess. So we'll do one example that's pretty on the nose and another one that's a bit more subtle in its approach to meta storytelling. You and Me and Her, a love story, colloquially known as You, Me, and Dupree, is a romance visual novel about a listless high school student who must choose between dating his childhood crush or the quirky and awkward shy student. His childhood friend is the stereotypical perfectionist popular girl everyone admires, and the quirky girl is hyper aware she's in a video game and can talk to God. At least that's what she says. You, Me, and Her wears its meta-narrative on its sleeve by having a character constantly bring up that yes, you are playing a game. And yes, she is a character you can romance, and yes, the choices you make will change the content you get. Owie, ayo, ayo, ow, owie, ouchie, aoe. Aquafina will talk directly to the player about what the game is and that she's a character in a video game. She will contact God to save her progress and patch the game, and is a walking fourth wall break. The protagonist, Shinichi? Protagonist Shenron and the other characters of the game comment and remark that everything she says is crazy and that she is delusional. And while they do find her confusing, all three main characters still hang out with her and get into goofy anime shenanigans. You know how it is. Nyan nyan, am I right, fellow gamers? Embarrassment began to creep into Jacob's soul, alone in his office garage, saying cringy anime catgirl lines into his microphone with a blanket over his head well past midnight. Jacob began to wonder what he was doing with his life, where he had gone wrong. Isolated. I don't like this bit. Alan, man, can we not do this one? I'm not digging it. What makes the game truly compelling and turns it from a generic anime romance into a more complex meta narrative is the question of, what if she's right? What if she is just a character in the game? What does that mean for the story? The protagonist? The player? Is Aquifer insane, or is she really just a fictional character who knows she's fictional? I'll let you play the game to find out, but you could probably guess what the answer to that one is. But yeah, Deltarune is amazing and everyone needs to play it. Deltarune is an RPG that serves as a spiritual successor / sequel to Undertale. It's a fairly standard JRPG-inspired pixel art indie game. at first glance. But once you get into it, it's a masterpiece of meta-narrative writing. So far, the game's not quite done yet, but Chapter 2 slaps so hard, dude. Oh my god. Deltarune is a game told in second person. The protagonist, Chris, colloquially known as Crisp, is a separate character from the player themselves. The dialogue in the game will differentiate between saying Crisp's name and just you, referring to either how the player may be feeling or how the protagonist is feeling. Frisk will sometimes go against what the player wants to do, acknowledging the difference between who the character really is and how they are while being controlled. The game opens up by saying your choices don't matter, but the game design reveals that Fritz's choices do matter. And if the person being controlled has more autonomy than the person controlling them, well, you get some really sweet storytelling. Deltarune is doing something incredible that I've never seen a video game do before. Go play it, it's completely free, and more people need to experience it. Someday I'll make a video on it and talk all about it and share its secrets. Probably see you in 8 months when that video is done. So meta-narrative has two big categories. The first is, hey, you're playing a video game. And the second is, hey, you're playing a video game. And we know you're playing a video game. The first is usually used in a form of parody or reference, which is why it's often used more comically than tragically. Conker asking the developers for a sword to defeat the final boss, and Flowery telling you to replay the game to get a different ending, or more examples of just acknowledging that you're playing a game. But Aoi speaking directly to the player about saving their game, and Deltarune saying that the player feels something and not the protagonist, is more an example of the game adding the player into the story itself, and being aware that you're playing a game. I know it's a bit of a weird concept, and I hope the examples are understandable enough because I was very vague about them, but I wanted to avoid spoilers. So that's the best way I can describe what meta-narrative is. It's games that know their games, and it's games that make the real-life player a character in the game world as well. If you really want to understand it, just, oh my god, just play Doki Doki Literature Club and Deltarune. They're both free, they'll run on toasters, please just play them. They're like the best meta stories out there. Seriously, just go play them. Don't even finish this video. Just go play them. Don't watch this video. Dislike, unsubscribe. Don't even think about ringing that bell. Just go and play them. Please play those games. They're so good. Meta-metaphor is when the player is metaphorically in the game's story, or symbolically in the game world. Like what me in the past said about 9 minutes ago. God, that guy never shuts up about No More Heroes. At least he's not talking about Dead Space again. Oh my gosh. Gordon Freeman in Half-Life has zero personality and no speaking lines because he's meant to be a metaphorical stand-in for the player. A blank slate for the player to self-insert into. Same with Halo, Doom, and older Legend of Zelda titles. Blank slates with little or as little as possible personality that the player is supposed to identify as. But then you have role-playing games like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Baldur's Gate, and the Souls series where you create your own protagonist to self-insert into. It was me, Mom. I'm the new ruler of the lands between. I'm the Dragonborn. Check it out, Dad. I had sex with a bear. When you name and create your character, you are symbolically representing yourself in the game world. Even when you make a character that is nothing like you, and you're role-playing someone as far removed from what you look, act, and sound like, it's still your creation. Meaning it's still a reflection of yourself as an individual, ergo, a symbolic representation of you, the person playing the game. It's a metaphor, just like what we're talking about in this video chapter. Wow. Meta-metaphors can also be applied for characters that aren't blank slates. Games like No More Heroes and Spec Ops: The Line have protagonists that have distinct personalities, goals, and motivations separate from the player. But the themes and events of the games are metaphors for how the player should feel while playing the game. The loading screens of Spec Ops changes from gameplay tips to deep philosophical questions about the nature of playing games and are directly aimed at the player playing the game, not the protagonist. The game is asking you to think about the events of the game, think about playing the game, and really consider the ethics of what you're doing.
We did it, Patrick! We saved the city! Just think what might have happened if we didn't tell everyone about the monster!
So, while making this video, Spec Ops: The Line has been delisted from all digital storefronts, and that is it's just terrible.
Kill us.
Spec Ops is a foundational work of art when it comes to metaphoric storytelling in the medium, and it really needs to be preserved and cherished and studied and get better respect than just, you know, licensing expiring. The game industry needs to do better on that one, right? It's not cool. Everyone needs to play Spec Ops. It is one of the most important games ever made, especially especially in terms of video game storytelling. Yeah, I'm not a fan of doing this this off-script thing mid-video, so let's do that thing where we hard cut transition to the next point. Yep, that's how we're gonna end this one. Characters in No More Heroes constantly bring up the fact you're playing a video game, and just how fun that violent gameplay is. But that violent gameplay is only half of the game. When you're not playing through the story stages and killing bosses, the player has to do odd job mini-games around the barren open world to get the funding to do the story missions. The NPCs you get the jobs from will comment on how boring you are as a person, that the only way to move up in the world is working hard, grinding daily, and paying your dues. Biting commentary on both how bland open world games can be compared to tightly designed levels, and a metaphor for the life the players themselves may live, grinding 9 to 5 at their jobs just to come home and relax to play some violent games. It's a game that wastes the player's time deliberately to mimic the mundanity of life and how people use video games as escapism to cope with their normalcy. And you can use the Wii Remote like a phone. S-rank masterpiece, baby! Of course, there's even more layers than that. This is a general video game essay and not a specific title video essay, so I'm done talking about No More Heroes. Tell you what, I'll bring up No More Heroes in the Deltarune video. There you go. Now you'll have something to look forward to next year. Games that have metaphorical storytelling to comment on the player, time period of the industry, or just the medium of games in general tend to be my personal favorite, and usually, at least in my opinion, they tend to be some of the strongest stories video games have to offer. I know I was pretty vague talking about No More Heroes and Spec Ops: The Line, but the more I talk about these games and the metaphors they use, the more I'm spoiling what makes them so special. They seem to have almost an endless supply of depth in their stories, and how the game mechanics and the visuals and the sound is all wrapped into those stories to deliver experiences that can only exist as a video game. I truly believe in teaching video games 101 or whatever, that No More Heroes and Spec Ops: The Line and Doki Doki Literature Club and Conker's Bad Fur Day and Inscription make the 5-point trifecta perfect star of meta storytelling. Oh shoot, and Metal Gear Solid 2. That's like the most important one. Yeah, make it like a double trifecta or a hexagon or whatever. They're games that include all the elements we've talked about, have a near limitless amount of depth in the stories they tell, are from developers all around the world with different team sizes, and comment on different eras and aspects of creativity and game development. Just go play video games, please. Play these games. Stop watching YouTube videos. They're so cool. Just please play them. Oh my god. Not to say that games must have metaphorical storytelling or any other variation of meta storytelling to tell an engaging and successful narrative. There are even more games revered as the best stories the medium has to offer that completely lack the concepts and techniques we talked about. I just think it's really cool when games utilize their medium to the fullest and tell stories that can only exist as a video game. It's just pretty sick.
I was sure that was the final level. Oh well. Obviously not.
Let's recap. A meta tutorial is the game breaking the fourth wall to teach the player how to play. Whether that's by breaking the fourth wall and bluntly telling the player how to play, or by diegetically teaching the player how to play through playing the game naturally. I'd argue almost every game on the planet has some sort of tutorial or wall-breaking way to teach the player how to play, but some specific examples of meta tutorials are games like this, and this. A meta mechanic is doing something in real life to affect the game world. Whether that's motion controls, messing with controller ports, or going through the game's files. If you are interacting with something or doing an activity outside of the game to affect it, then it's a meta mechanic. Games like this, and this all have some sort of meta mechanic within them. A meta narrative is a game that refers to itself as being a game. Whether that's the characters understanding it's a game and fitting the story within those confines, or if the players themselves are an active participant in the game's narrative. A meta narrative is the game understanding and acknowledging the medium it is in. Examples like this, and this are all meta narratives. And lastly, a meta metaphor is a game using metaphor to express itself being a game or to place the player within the game's world. While it's not directly saying, ooh-wee, look at me, I'm a video game, the game metaphorically alludes to its medium and to the player playing the game. Games like this, and this all use meta metaphors within their stories. The culmination of his creation was coming. The end. Seconds remained before Jacob would be cut off from the world once again, returning to ruminate in isolation for an undetermined amount of time, alone in the dark place. Right. Alan! Dude! I said we're not doing these anymore! Meta storytelling is how games transcend from the fictional world into reality. Video games games inherently are the culmination of all the arts and sciences combined. Programming, design, art, writing, music, math, acting, etc. All the elements of human expression and the foundations of science all working in tandem to create new realities just so we can have a bit of fun. That's magic, dude. And the fact that we can use meta techniques to make those experiences be a part of the real world just makes it even more magical. Seriously, we have only scratched the surface of what video game storytelling is capable of. And I believe that meta elements are the key to progressing and pushing those storytelling capabilities as far as they can go. Every game we talked about is something truly special that should be played, and they all exist as things that can only exist as a video game. If we really want the medium to continue forward and become the true apex of artistic expression and scientific pursuit that I know it can be, then we need to pursue and appreciate experiences that highlight what makes video games just so special. But judging by just these examples alone, I think it's safe to say that the future of storytelling, meta or otherwise, is in really good hands. Wait! I get it! His name's Meta Knight!